Oh, give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Give me Jesus. When I am alone, oh, when I am alone, when I am alone, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, oh, give me Jesus, you can have all this world.
And good morning, good morning, good morning. And we are here again at Easy Bible Study with a really cool study. I'm actually really excited. I did a bunch of prep work yesterday for this. And I don't know. I'm not really a math person, but I do feel like I was channeling my uncle, although he's still alive, and I don't believe in channeling. But anyway, but I was like getting this into the spirit of math yesterday. So grab your Bible. Today we are in Genesis 11, and we are on verses 10 through 32. And this is going to be so much fun because we're going to see some really interesting things leading up to our next section of the Bible, which goes on for quite some time here in Genesis. So grab your Bible, grab your notebook, and let's get going here. I'll be right back after this.
You can have all this world. Give me Jesus.
Well, and if you do find any value in this content, do me a favor, click like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of my content. And as you can see, I've kind of moved the room around a little bit so you can, the cameras are in the same spot, but they are not, they are, well, I think I just saw my husband go past. That was funny. Anyway, they are in the same spot, but I've moved my desk back a little bit so I have a little bit more space to work between us. So that's kind of fun. Anyway, let's take a look at this. If you do find something that is fascinating about this, or you do find the value here, share this actually, because sharing is how the word gets spread much more frequently and much more consistently. So we are going to step into Genesis 11 today, verses 10 through 32. I'm going to go ahead and read the passage to you. I'm going to put it up on the screen, but it's going to be very tiny print, so I'm not sure if you're going to be able to read it at all. But hopefully you have your own Bible that you are reading from, because that is actually better anyway. But I will put that up on the screen so that you guys can see that, and we'll see if it works for you. All right, here we go. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Selah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Selah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Selah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Selah lived after he begat Eber 403 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 34 years, or Eber, not sure if it's Eber or Eber, and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years, and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 230 years, and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 207 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Sarah lived 30 years and begat Nahor. And and Sarah lived after he begat Nahor 200 years and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. And the name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren, and she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. I don't know what it is, but whenever I have to read a lot, all of a sudden I start yawning, probably because all the extra oxygen I'm having to pull in. So that is a really long passage, and that might seem super, super boring, except there's some pretty cool things about this. So what I actually did here is I actually pre-prepped my notes for this particular episode. And you can see I've got all the different notes and all the different dates and times and everything. So let's really unpack this and take a look at this. And then I'm going to show you some interesting things about this time period. So first of all, we know that Shem we've got the order of who is it. It goes Shem, Arphaxad, Selah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Sereg, Nahor, Terah, Abram. All right, so then we get from Shem, which is right after the flood, okay? He was 100 years old, and this is interesting. It's the only one of Ham, Shem, and Japheth that we know for sure they're, or Shem, Ham, and Japheth, we should say. We know for sure their life and how many years they lived on the earth and how old they were when the flood came. So we know for sure that Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. So that tells us that Shem was 98 years old at the flood. Or maybe 97, because the flood lasted almost a year in totality between the rain and the down, and then, or as far as like being in the ark, they were in the ark for almost a year. So he was basically 97 years old or 98 years old when the flood happened. And 2 years after the flood, he gave birth to his first child, Arphaxad. All right? Which, if you remember, if you look back, we actually covered this when we went back into, where was it? Let's see here. In chapter, let's see here. Chapter 4, I think it was. Chapter 5, where it goes through Adam's family record. All right? When it goes through Adam's family record and we get to Lamech and we get to the end there, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Right? And then if you remember in chapter 6, these are the generations of Noah. Noah begat his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But it didn't tell us anything about how old they were in that section. And so this is where we find out, okay, so now we actually know. So a lot of people think that we cannot date the world back to the beginning, but we actually can. Because we know how old Adam lived too. We know how old Adam was when he died. So if day 1 is his creation and the day he died, well, if we have all those dates all the way back, then we absolutely can. And we do have most of these dates going all the way back, including when we get further into things, going up through the generations of Jacob and Isaac, Joseph, all the other generations. So we do have a really good idea of how old the earth actually is based on these passages. And that's one of the reasons why this passage is so interesting, is that we have some very specific dates and times. This idea that God is not a God of time, that he's not a God of substance, that he's not a God of maths or science, completely wrong. But it's really interesting. So we know here that Shem actually lived, he was actually 600 years old. And we go through all of these, and I can give you all the years of all of them. And if you want to go back through the passage and do the same structure or a similar structure that makes it nice for you, absolutely do that. But what we do know is that Shem lived to be 600 years. Arphaxad lived to be 400, and actually let's write them in here because I didn't actually write them in total. 600 is what Shem lived to. Arphaxad lived to, let's see here, 403 plus 35 is 438. So I should write it here actually in this part. 438. Selah lived 433. Eber lived 464. Peleg lived, now this is where it gets interesting because we see a huge drop after Eber in life expectancy or how long people lived. Peleg only lived 239 years. 239 years. And Ru, now we do know some interesting things happened with Peleg, because where is it? When we go back into the previous chapter, the name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. And it almost makes you wonder if, when the earth was divided, if all of a sudden other geographical and environmental things happened, because all of a sudden we see a drastic drop in the age of how old people live to be. And not just with Peleg. Peleg lived to be 239 years. Ru, let's see here. I'm terrible when it comes to, okay, 9. So 239 years as well for Ru. Interesting. They both lived exactly the same. 239. All right. I think. Yep, 239. Sereg, 230. Nahor. Now Nahor actually did not live. That's Abram's grandfather, Nahor. So let's see here. Nahor actually died quite young, and we're not really entirely sure why. 119 plus he was 29 when they were born. So he only lived to 148. So we see another drastic drop right there with Nahor. Terah went back up to the 200. Terah, Abram's dad, lived to be 205, and we don't have the rest of it, how old, all of this. So what I did as well yesterday is I mapped out all of this. Now, Abram, and I did kind of, spoiler alert, I did move forward to see when Isaac was born, and Abram was 100 years old when his son was born. And we'll talk about that story because that's a whole nother story going through things as to when Abram had children, etc. So Shem, what I found interesting about this is how old were these? When you look at the fact that Shem lived to be 600 years old, how many of these lives overlapped? Well, first of all, let me explain. A lot of them. A lot of them. Because you go all the way from Shem, all the way down through to Abram. And let me show you, let me demonstrate, and I will be able to tell you, because I sat down and mapped this all out yesterday. Shem actually was alive when Abram was born. And he was 390 years. 390 years old. So Abram was alive, and by the way, Abram was 290 years if he lived that long before his ancient ancestor that went back to the flood died. So what makes that kind of interesting and fascinating is the fact that you have to keep in mind Shem lived for 290 years, or Abram had to be 290 years if he lived that long to have completely overlapped Shem's life. And we haven't even seen that yet. Arphaxad was 290 years when Abram was born. He was still alive. Selah was 255 years old when Abram was born. Eber was 225 years old when Abram was born. Peleg was 191. All of these ancestors, going all the way back to the flood, were still alive when Abram was born. Every single one of them. Even his grandfather and his great-great-great-grandfather, every single one of them still alive when he was born. Excuse me. So we can go back to father, grandfather, great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather for Abram, when he was born. And all of them were, pretty old, but not ridiculously old. Let's talk about how old some of these people were when they died in relationship to Abram. Because I sat down and I did some math and I went, well, if they were this old when Abram was born, how old was Abram when they died? If Abram even lived that long, because there doesn't seem to be, we're not really sure about this. Well, first of all, we do know that Abram would have had to be 290 years old in order for him to have outlasted Shem. He would have had to live to 148, which he most likely did, wherein Arphaxad was around. Selah Abram would have had to have lived 178 years. So when we get into the next chapter and we're talking about Abram and Terah leaving, it's a lot more significant because all of these men in his lineage are still alive and they're all still living in the same area. Think about that for a second. Every single one of these men in this were alive up to the point where Abram was 48 or 49 years old. They all lived together. Because if you notice here, it says, but Sarai was barren, and she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarah. So it was like, And Haran died before his father. So we do know that Nahor and Peleg died. Well, Peleg died when Abram was 48 years old. And Nahor died when his grandfather died when he was 49 years old. So we do know that is the truth. 100%. So his grandfather died when he was 49. And it looks like they left probably soon after Nahor had passed. I mean, look at poor Terah. So in a span of a short time, he loses his father. I mean, he was only, well, let's see. It was 49 when Abram was born. So 70 and 49. He was like 139. Oh, sorry. Nope. 70, that's 30. So he was 119 when his dad died. So he was 119 when his dad died. And his son died sometime in that period as well. Sometime during that time, His son died. And Abram, he didn't even give birth, or he didn't even have Abram. Now, obviously, he didn't give birth. His wife did. But Abram wasn't even born until he was 70. So there's Abram. That means that we do know that Haran most likely died sometime maybe within 50 years of his birth. Because we have this, and Terah, and we've got all of these, and Haran died before his father, and Abram and Nahor took them wives. It talks about their wives. Let's see here. Actually, there's no evidence that they didn't leave right after that. We don't know that they were around when Nahor died. It is always a possibility that Terah left because of the death of his son. It doesn't tell us how his son died either. That's what's interesting. It doesn't say that it was by any kind of violent means, like that somebody took his life. We don't have any evidence of that. We don't have any evidence of a disease per se, and that wasn't something that they said. It just says that he died before his father, Terah, in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So we do know that Ur of the Chaldees is where Haran died. Now, why is Haran important? Well, the main reason that Haran is important is because he's the father of Lot. And Lot, or Abram's nephew, Lot, is going to play a big part in this next section and in some of the stories that we're coming up to here. And so it's important to know that the reason that Lot is with Abram is because his grandfather, it sounds very much like, and I'm kind of guessing at this, but it sounds like possibly it might have been some tragic kind of accident where both parents were killed, because it's unlikely that Terah would have taken Lot with him if it wasn't for if his parents were alive. So we know that his dad has passed before they left. We just don't know for sure on the status of his mom. But it does seem very likely, because it actually says, because of the fact that it says, and Terah took Abram his son and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son. So it's like he's being very active in taking them with him. He's not just saying, oh, they kind of came with him or they went with him. It wasn't like it says he encouraged them. No, he took them. Now, Abram is old enough to be married. But it's interesting that he didn't take his other son. So it's not like he's just taking his sons. He doesn't take Nahor. He doesn't take Nahor and Milcah with him. But he does take Lot. And he does take Abram, and he does take Sarai. All we know for sure is that sometime after Lot was born, he goes with. Now, the other thing we don't know for sure is we don't have a wife for Lot here yet. There's no evidence that Lot has a wife, so it is always possible that Terah had custody of Lot. There's always a good possibility that his parents died, and so he was being raised by his grandfather. Because we have Abram being married, but we don't have Lot necessarily being married. Now, we do know later on Lot does get married, but we don't actually know precisely when that is. And we'll talk about that as well in the future when we come up to it. But all of these are really interesting questions and really interesting things that have been posed. And it's all in this. This is why genealogies are so fascinating, because it gives you the whole family structure. And in honesty, sometimes it opens up more questions than it answers. But it's fascinating the amount of questions that it asks and opens up for us. So we know that Abram and Nahor took their wives, and we know now at the end of chapter 11 that we are about to embark on a great adventure, because Terah has taken Abram and Lot and Sarai, and they have left. And if you remember, I'm going to put up the map here, actually. Let's go ahead and put up the map, because I do believe that was on the map. Yes, so if you see right down here, in fact, what I'll do is this. Let's zoom in on it. Let us do this. We're going to zoom in. We'll zoom in and we'll pull down here. You can see right down here, right in the middle there, Ur. That is Ur of the Chaldees. As you can see, they actually believe that was a seafront town. You can see right here the presumed ancient coastline is actually where Ur is. So we actually think that Ur was somewhere on the Persian Gulf here. That it was actually right there on the Persian Gulf, and that the ancient waterline actually extended to that city. And Arida as well. So he's now taking them from Ur of the Chaldees, and it says that he's going to take them to the land of Canaan. All right, so that is from right here all the way across the Arabian desert to the land of Canaan. I don't know why this map says Palestine, because Palestine is not a word that existed at that time and definitely didn't exist. Didn't exist at all. There was no land of Palestine until, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago. But anyway, so Canaan is where they're headed. So they're going from Ur, and they are going to be crossing the Arabian desert. Now, it's always possible they went up through Babylonia and up through here, and then back down. But these are desert dwellers, so it's always a possibility they just cross the Arabian desert. It's not impossible to cross the Arabian desert. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. And keep in mind, Terah is probably mourning right now. He is mourning the loss of his son because, that's kind of a terrible thing. He's lost his son. And he lost his son, and he may have lost his father, or his father might have been aging. But what we do know is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We do know there are actually 6 of these men who were still alive when God fulfills his promise to Abram. And that's super fascinating. So anyway, hopefully you're kind of getting into this and understanding the ages and all these men who overlapped with Abram. Every single one of these men was alive when Abram was born. So Abram knew them. And if Terah did not leave, he was 70 years old. So when Abram was born. And Abram was old enough to be grown and have a wife. So that means he was probably at least 20 years old. Because even in the ancient world, men were technically of adulthood at age 13, but they often weren't married that young. So it is very, very likely that Abram himself was around 20. Sarah might have been younger. But at the very least, Abram was probably about 20 years old. And then Abram's also there with his nephew, who is being raised, it looks like, almost like a brother to him. Which makes a lot of sense when you kind of look at all this. So, very fascinating stuff. We've got Terah. At the end of this chapter, we have Terah, Abram, Lot, and Sarai. And they're heading out. They're heading out of Ur, and they're going across the desert, and they're heading towards Canaan. And that's where we're going to find them in not all that long. But join me on Monday, because this is when we start really digging into the story of Abram. And I want to make it really obvious I'm calling him Abram for a very specific reason. And we will get into that as well as we get into these chapters. So I am so excited because now we get to go back to some storytelling. Lots and lots of stories that are going to be happening here, and lots of interesting things. And a little bit of a detour for Abram and Terah, Sarai, and Lot. So anyway, join me on Monday, and we will get into this more. Now that you know a little bit more about whether, keep in mind, they are left. All of these men are likely alive when they leave Ur. And means a whole lot more when you're leaving every single member of your family, except for your father and your nephew, and going somewhere else. It's really incredible. All right, I'll see you Monday, and let's dig into God's Word some more on Monday. Can't wait to see what lessons God has for us and what truths He has. Have yourself a great and awesome weekend, and I will see you Monday morning. Bye for now.
You can have all this world. Give me Jesus. When I am alone, oh, when I am alone, when I am alone, give me Jesus, give me Jesus.